Isaiah Moore didn't want trouble. He just wanted to blend in. But in a quiet town where stairs lingered too long and teachers like Ms. Peterson ruled the classroom like a courtroom, trouble didn't wait for permission. He was 12, smart, polite, and grieving, still aching from the loss of his mom. On his third day at a new school, all he did was bump a tray. What followed wasn't detention, it was humiliation. And when Ketchup ran down his scalp in front of stunned classmates, no one knew his father, the man who just walked through the door, was the town's newly appointed sheriff. Real quick, where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city in the comments. We love seeing how far these stories travel. This one's going to take a shocking turn, so don't blink. And hey, if emotional, powerful stories are your thing, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Isaiah Moore stood at the edge of Westbrook Middle School's playground, watching the other kids laughing and playing. He was the new kid again. This was his third school in 2 years. Not because he got in trouble, but because his dad's job kept moving them around. "You okay, champ?" Sheriff James Moore asked, kneeling down to straighten Isaiah's striped tie. His father's badge caught the morning sunlight. "I'm fine, Dad," Isaiah mumbled, though his stomach felt like it was tied in knots. Sheriff Moore squeezed his son's shoulder. "Remember what Mom used to say? Stand tall like you belong, because you do," Isaiah finished. The memory of his mother made his heart ache. She'd been gone for almost 2 years now. "That's right. I'll pick you up at 3:30. His dad hugged him quickly, then headed back to his patrol car. Isaiah took a deep breath and walked through the double doors. The hallways were a maze, but he found room 112 just as the bell rang. 24 pairs of eyes turned to stare at him. A tall woman with gray-streaked hair and thin lips looked down at him. "You must be Isaiah Moore." "I'm Ms. Peterson." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Take the empty seat in the back." Isaiah slid into his seat, feeling the weight of everyone's stares. He was the only black student in the class. That morning, Ms. Peterson called on everyone except Isaiah, even when his hand was the only one raised. When he finally spoke up during science, she cut him off. "We don't interrupt in this classroom, Isaiah. Perhaps things were different at your old school, but here we have standards." Her words stung like tiny needles. Isaiah felt his face grow hot as a few students snickered. At lunch, Isaiah sat alone, picking at his food. He missed his old friends. He missed his mom. He even missed their old apartment in the city. His dad had moved them to this small town for a fresh start, but it didn't feel fresh at all. What Isaiah didn't know was that Ms. Peterson was watching him from across the cafeteria, her eyes narrowed. She'd been teaching at Westbrook for 20 years, and she prided herself on maintaining order. New students always needed to learn their place, especially ones who seemed too eager to speak up. And she had no idea that the new black student quietly eating lunch alone was the son of the town's new sheriff, a man who had built his career on fighting injustice wherever he found it. 3 days later, Isaiah was still struggling to fit in. He'd made exactly 0 friends. Miss Peterson had called him out 4 more times for disrupting class when all he'd done was answer questions correctly. During lunch period, Isaiah carefully balanced his tray as he looked for an empty table. The cafeteria was crowded and loud. He spotted a space and hurried toward it, not noticing Ms. Peterson walking in his path. Their collision wasn't hard, but it was enough. A small splash of milk from Isaiah's tray landed on Ms. Peterson's beige skirt. "I'm so sorry," Isaiah gasped, his eyes wide with horror. Ms. Peterson's face darkened. "Did you do that on purpose?" she demanded, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "No, ma'am. It was an accident." Isaiah felt a cold wave of panic wash over him. First disrupting my classroom, now this? Ms. Peterson's voice cut through the cafeteria chatter. Everyone was watching now. "You need to learn respect." "But I didn't mean detention." Today after school, she dabbed at her skirt with a napkin, her lips pressed into a thin line. Isaiah's shoulders slumped. His dad was supposed to take him to the science museum after school. Now he'd have to call and cancel. Again. Word about the cafeteria incident spread quickly. In math class, a freckled boy named Tyler leaned over. "Peterson's had it out for you since day 1, he whispered. Last year, she made Sophia cry because her project was too creative. Isaiah just nodded, keeping his eyes on his textbook. He didn't want more trouble. After school, Isaiah sat alone in detention, watching the clock tick by. He'd called his dad from the office phone earlier. Sheriff Moore had sounded tired but understanding. "We'll reschedule, buddy. Just do what the teacher asks, okay?" Isaiah hadn't told him what really happened. His dad was busy enough with his new job. At home that night, Isaiah picked at his dinner while his father talked about work. The sheriff's office was understaffed, and his dad was working overtime to fix problems the previous sheriff had ignored. "How's school going?" his dad finally asked. "Making any friends?" Isaiah shrugged. "It's okay. Just different." Sheriff Moore studied his son's face. "You know, you can tell me if something's wrong, right?" "I know, Dad." Isaiah forced a smile. Everything's fine, but everything wasn't fine. Miss Peterson had started watching Isaiah like a hawk, waiting for any mistake. And tomorrow was the class science project presentation, the one Isaiah had worked on for 3 days straight. He didn't know it yet, but it would become the worst day of his school life. Isaiah spent that evening perfecting his volcano model. Science was his favorite subject, and this project mattered to him. His mother had been a chemist, the best one in the state, his dad always said. Doing well in science made Isaiah feel connected to her. When he finished, he stood back to admire his work. The volcano looked realistic, with detailed lava flows and even tiny trees around the base. He couldn't wait to demonstrate how it worked. "That looks amazing, Bud," his dad said, appearing in the doorway. He was still in his sheriff's uniform, having worked late again. "Thanks, Dad. Do you think Mom would have liked it?" Sheriff Moore's eyes softened. "She would have loved it. Probably would have helped you make the eruption twice as big and 10 times messy, eh?" They both laughed, remembering how his mother had always taken experiments to the extreme. The next morning, Isaiah carefully carried his volcano to school. Miss Peterson's gaze followed him as he placed it on the display table with the other projects. "Quite elaborate," she commented coldly. "Did your father help you with that?" "No, ma'am. I did it myself." Miss Peterson raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Throughout the morning, tension built in the classroom. Isaiah noticed Miss Peterson marking his spelling test with heavy red pen strokes, shaking her head. When she handed it back, he saw a D+ at the top, despite being sure he'd gotten most answers right. At recess, Tyler found Isaiah sitting alone. "Your volcano is awesome," he said, plopping down beside him. "Peterson's just jealous because it's better than the examples she showed us." "Thanks," Isaiah mumbled. "I just want to get through the presentation." Tyler hesitated. "Just be careful. When Peterson doesn't like someone, she can be mean." Back in class, the science presentations began. Students took turns explaining their projects while Ms. Peterson judged each one. When it was Isaiah's turn, he stood tall beside his volcano, remembering his mother's words. "My project demonstrates how pressure builds up inside a volcano until—" "Speak up, Isaiah," Ms. Peterson interrupted. "The class can't hear you mumbling." Isaiah started again, louder this time. He carefully mixed the baking soda and vinegar, explaining the chemical reaction. The volcano erupted perfectly, sending lava flowing down the sides. Several classmates gasped and applauded. Ms. Peterson's lips tightened. "I see you've created quite a mess. Not very scientific, is it? More like a carnival trick." Isaiah's heart sank. "But it shows how real volcanoes work." "That's enough. Clean this up and sit down." C- for execution. The class fell silent. Isaiah's eyes burned with unshed tears as he cleaned his project. He'd worked so hard, and it had been perfect. What he didn't notice was Ms. Peterson watching him with narrowed eyes. Something about this boy challenged her authority. She needed to make an example of him, and soon. The following day, the cafeteria served hamburgers and French fries. Isaiah sat with Tyler and 2 other boys who had started talking to him after the volcano incident. For the first time since arriving at Westbrook, Isaiah felt a flicker of belonging. "Your volcano was the best one," said Marcus, one of the new boys. "Peterson was totally unfair." Isaiah shrugged. It's okay. There's always next time. What Isaiah didn't know was that Ms. Peterson had been watching him from the teacher's table, her anger building. She'd overheard several students praising Isaiah's project despite her harsh grading. In her mind, he was undermining her authority. As lunch ended, Isaiah gathered his trash. Ms. Peterson approached, holding a ketchup bottle she'd taken from the condiment station. Isaiah, I need you back in the classroom. Now, confused, Isaiah followed her. The hallways were mostly empty as other students headed to recess. Inside the classroom, Ms. Peterson closed the door and turned to face him. Sit down, she ordered, pointing to his desk. Isaiah sat, puzzled and increasingly nervous. Did I do something wrong? You know exactly what you've done. You've been disruptive since you arrived. You think you're smarter than everyone else. You need to learn your place. Before Isaiah could respond, Miss Peterson moved behind him. He felt her hand grip his shoulder tightly. Then came a cold, wet sensation on his head. Ketchup. She was squeezing ketchup into his hair. What? Isaiah tried to stand, but her grip tightened. You deserve this, she hissed, continuing to empty the bottle onto his head. Maybe now you'll learn some respect. The red condiment oozed down Isaiah's forehead, into his eyes, onto his white school shirt and striped tie. He squeezed his eyes shut, tears mixing with the ketchup. The humiliation burned worse than the ketchup stinging his eyes. Students returning early from recess peered through the classroom door's window. Some gasped. Others covered their mouths in shock. One ran to find another teacher. Isaiah sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. The classroom door suddenly opened. Mr. Jenkins, the history teacher, stood in the doorway, his face shifting from confusion to horror. Ms. Peterson. What in God's name are you doing? He demanded. Teaching a necessary lesson, she replied coldly, finally releasing Isaiah's shoulder. Mr. Jenkins rushed to Isaiah, grabbing tissues from a box on the desk. Are you all right, son? He asked gently, helping Isaiah wipe ketchup from his eyes. Isaiah couldn't speak, couldn't even nod. The shame was overwhelming. Go to the nurse's office, Mr. Jenkins told him softly. Then to Ms. Peterson, you stay right here. I'm calling Principal Douglas immediately. As Isaiah walked through the hallway, ketchup dripping from his hair, students stared in shock. Some whispered, others looked away in embarrassment. The story of what Ms. Peterson had done was already racing through the school. It wouldn't be long before it reached the sheriff's office. In the nurse's office, Isaiah sat with his head down while Nurse Garcia gently cleaned ketchup from his hair and face. She'd given him a clean shirt, but nothing could wash away the humiliation. Honey, we've called her father, she said softly. Isaiah's head shot up. No, please, he's busy. He doesn't need to. What happened to you is serious, Isaiah. Your father needs to know. Across town, Sheriff James Moore was in a meeting with his deputies when his phone rang. As he listened to the principal's carefully worded explanation, his expression darkened. Without a word, he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Meeting's over, was all he said. When Sheriff Moore arrived at Westbrook Middle School, the secretary's eyes widened at the sight of his uniform and the thunderous expression on his face. I'm here for my son, Isaiah Moore. Principal Douglas emerged from his office with an anxious smile. Sheriff Moore, thank you for coming so quickly. If we could speak privately. Where is my son? The sheriff's voice was quiet but firm. The nurse's office, but I want to assure you we're handling this unfortunate incident. Sheriff Moore was already moving down the hallway. He found Isaiah sitting on a vinyl cot, hair damp for being washed, wearing an oversized Westbrook Athletics t-shirt. When Isaiah looked up and saw his father, his composure finally broke. Tears welled in his eyes. Dad. In 3 strides, Sheriff Moore crossed the room and pulled his son into a tight hug. I'm here now, he whispered. Over Isaiah's shoulder, he asked Nurse Garcia, what exactly happened? The nurse glanced nervously at Principal Douglas, who had followed the sheriff. Miss Peterson apparently put ketchup in his hair during lunch period. Mr. Jenkins intervened. Apparently, Sheriff Moore's voice was dangerously calm. Either she did or she didn't. She did, Isaiah said quietly. She said I deserved it, that I needed to learn my place. The principal stepped forward. Sheriff, Ms. Peterson is a valued educator with 20 years of experience. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Sheriff Moore turned, still keeping one arm around Isaiah. My son comes to school for an education and ends up assaulted by a teacher. What part of that is a misunderstanding? That's a very strong word, Sheriff. It's the correct word. Now, where is this Ms. Peterson? She's in my office, but... Good. Isaiah, wait here with Nurse Garcia. I'll be right back. As Sheriff Moore strode toward the principal's office, whispers followed him through the hallway. Students and teachers watched wide-eyed as the town's new sheriff, still in full uniform, badge gleaming, marched purposefully past them. In the principal's office, Ms. Peterson sat stiffly in a chair, her expression defiant rather than remorseful. She looked up as the door opened, expecting Principal Douglas. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with a 6-foot-tall sheriff whose son's ketchup-stained white shirt was now evidence in what could become a criminal matter. And in that moment, Ms. Peterson realized she had made a terrible mistake. Ms. Peterson, I'm Sheriff James Moore, Isaiah's father. The color drained from Ms. Peterson's face. Her eyes flicked to his badge, then back to his eyes. Sheriff, she repeated, her voice suddenly smaller. Yes? Now I'd like you to explain why you thought it appropriate to pour ketchup on my son's head and tell him he deserved it. Principal Douglas hovered nervously nearby. Perhaps we should all take a moment to. I'm not speaking to you right now, Sheriff Moore said without looking away from Ms. Peterson. I'm waiting for an answer. Ms. Peterson straightened her spine. Isaiah has been disruptive since he arrived. He challenges authority, interrupts class. By answering questions correctly, Sheriff Moore asked, by making an excellent science project. Those are the disruptions I've heard about from other students while walking down your hallway just now. You don't understand the dynamics of my classroom, Ms. Peterson insisted. Sometimes stronger measures are needed to maintain order. Humiliating a child is never an appropriate measure, Sheriff Moore replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. What you did wasn't discipline. It was assault. Principal Douglas stepped forward. Sheriff, that's a very serious accusation. Yes, it is. And there are apparently multiple witnesses, including another teacher. So here's what happens next. Sheriff Moore turned to face both educators. I'm taking my son home. Tomorrow, I'll be filing a formal complaint with the school board and the Department of Education. Miss Peterson's face flushed. This is ridiculous. In 20 years of teaching, have you done this before? Sheriff Moore interrupted. Humiliated other children who didn't fit your idea of a proper student? The silence that followed was telling. Meanwhile, in the nurse's office, Isaiah sat quietly as students kept finding excuses to walk past the open door, stealing glances at him. Tyler appeared in the doorway, hesitating before stepping inside. Hey, he said awkwardly. Are you okay? Isaiah shrugged. Not really. Tyler shifted his weight. I just wanted to say, we all saw what happened. Marcus recorded some of it on his phone before Mr. Jenkins came in. Isaiah looked up. He recorded it? Yeah. And there's something else you should know. Jenny's mom is on the school board, and she says Ms. Peterson got complaints before about how she treats certain kids worse than others. Before Isaiah could respond, voices in the hallway announced his father's return. Sheriff Moore thanked Nurse Garcia, then put his arm around Isaiah's shoulders. We're going home, buddy. As they walked through the school, students and teachers watched silently. Some looked ashamed, others sympathetic. Principal Douglas trailed behind them, still trying to manage the situation. Sheriff Moore, I assure you will handle this internally. The sheriff stopped and turned. No, you won't. You've already failed my son by allowing a teacher like that in your school. This goes beyond you now. In the car, Isaiah finally asked the question weighing on him. Dad, am I in trouble for causing problems at your new job? Sheriff Moore's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Isaiah, look at me. You didn't cause any problems. Miss Peterson did. Never, ever think that standing up against unfair treatment is causing problems. But your job, my job is to uphold the law and protect people. That includes my son. He reached over and squeezed Isaiah's shoulder. Your mother would have been proud of how brave you've been. For the first time that day, Isaiah felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. But as they drove home, neither of them knew that the incident was already spreading through the small town like wildfire, and this was just the beginning. By evening, Isaiah's phone buzzed with texts from classmates he barely knew. News traveled fast in small towns, and the story had evolved with each retelling. Sheriff Moore turned on the local news to find a reporter standing outside Westbrook Middle School. Allegations of a disturbing incident at Westbrook Middle have surfaced, involving a teacher and the son of newly appointed Sheriff James Moore. Isaiah sank deeper into the couch. I just want it to go away. I know, buddy, his father said, turning off the TV. But sometimes things need to come to light before they can get better. The next morning, Sheriff Moore kept Isaiah home from school and filed formal complaints as promised. By afternoon, his office had received dozens of calls, some supporting him, others questioning why he was making such a fuss over Ketchup. At the school, battle lines were drawn. Most teachers distanced themselves from Ms. Peterson, but a few defended her as strict but fair. Students began sharing stories of past incidents they'd witnessed or experienced. The video Marcus had taken, though brief, had spread widely, showing Ms. Peterson's hand gripping Isaiah's shoulder as ketchup dripped down his face. Principal Douglas called an emergency staff meeting. This situation has escalated beyond our walls, he announced tensely. Ms. Peterson has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. It's about time, Mr. Jenkins muttered loudly. After the meeting, the school secretary approached Mr. Jenkins. You should know something, she whispered. This isn't the first school where Ms. Peterson has had issues. I worked in HR before this position. There were complaints at her previous school, too, about how she treated certain students differently. Why wasn't anything done? The secretary looked around nervously. The records were handled discreetly. Principal Douglas knew when he hired her. The information reached Sheriff Moore that evening through an anonymous email containing personnel files that showed a pattern of complaints against Ms. Peterson at 3 different schools, all involving minority students. Each time, she had transferred before formal action was taken. Meanwhile, Isaiah struggled with the thought of returning to school. Everyone will stare at me. Maybe his father acknowledged. But you've done nothing wrong, Isaiah. Remember what Mom used to say? Stand tall like you belong, because you do, Isaiah recited. The sheriff nodded. The school board hearing is tomorrow. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. Isaiah thought for a long moment. Will Ms. Peterson be there? Yes. Then I want to talk. I need to. Across town, Ms. Peterson sat in her living room, surrounded by supportive notes from some parents and colleagues. She'd convinced herself she was the victim of political correctness, of a new sheriff trying to make an example of her. But as she scrolled through social media and saw the video for the first time, watching herself force ketchup into a child's hair while saying, "You deserve this," a tiny crack appeared in her certainty. For the first time, she saw herself through others' eyes, and what she saw disturbed her. The school board hearing would reveal whether that crack of self-awareness would widen into understanding, or whether she would double down on her justifications. Either way, tomorrow would change everything for Ms. Peterson, for Isaiah, and for a town force to confront uncomfortable truths. The school board meeting was held in the town hall to accommodate the crowd. Isaiah sat between his father and Mr. Jenkins, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. Ms. Peterson sat on the opposite side with Principal Douglas and her union representative. Board President Helen Martinez called the meeting to order. We're here to address a serious incident involving a student and a teacher at Westbrook Middle School. For the next hour, witnesses shared their accounts. Mr. Jenkins described finding Ms. Peterson pouring ketchup on Isaiah's head. Several students testified about seeing the incident or experiencing Ms. Peterson's different treatment of Isaiah. The video was played, causing murmurs throughout the room. When Ms. Peterson's turn came, she appeared subdued but unrepentant. I admit my actions were unconventional, but they were meant to instill discipline in a disruptive student. Perhaps I went too far, but my intentions were to maintain control of my classroom. And telling the child he deserved this treatment? Board member Wilson asked. Taken out of context, Ms. Peterson replied stiffly. Sheriff Moore presented the personnel file showing Ms. Peterson's history at other schools. This isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern of targeting certain students. Principal Douglas was questioned about hiring Ms. Peterson despite knowing her history. He stammered through an explanation about giving experienced teachers second chances and documentation issues. Finally, it was Isaiah's turn to speak. He approached the microphone, looking smaller than his 12 years in his crisp white shirt and striped tie, the same uniform he'd worn the day of the incident. I don't like talking in front of people, he began quietly. But my mom always said standing up for yourself is important, even when it's scary. The room fell silent. I tried really hard at Ms. Peterson's class. I raised my hand. I did my homework. I made a volcano that actually worked. But nothing was ever good enough. Isaiah's voice grew steadier. When she put ketchup in my hair, she said I deserved it, that I needed to learn my place. Isaiah looked directly at Ms. Peterson for the first time since the incident. I know what she meant by my place. It wasn't about being a good student. It was about being quiet and invisible because I'm different from most kids here. Isaiah turned back to the board. I don't want Ms. Peterson to lose her job because she doesn't like me. I want her to lose her job so she can't make any other kid feel like they don't belong. The room erupted in applause. Sheriff Moore put his arm around his son's shoulders as they returned to their seats. Isaiah saw Tyler and his other new friends giving him thumbs up from the audience. After a brief deliberation, the board returned with their decision. Based on the evidence presented, including documentation of previous incidents, the board has voted to terminate Ms. Peterson's employment effective immediately. Ms. Peterson stood abruptly. This is a travesty. 20 years of service, and I'm fired because of one incident. Board President Martinez remained calm. No, Ms. Peterson. You're being fired because of multiple incidents across multiple schools, showing a pattern of discriminatory behavior that has no place in education. As Ms. Peterson stormed out, Principal Douglas attempted to follow, but Martinez stopped him. The board will be conducting a full review of hiring practices and incident reporting at Westbrook. We'll need your full cooperation, Principal Douglas. The principal's face paled as he realized his own position was now in jeopardy. As the meeting adjourned, people surrounded Isaiah, offering support and apologies for not speaking up sooner. For the first time since moving to town, Isaiah felt truly seen, not as the new kid or the sheriff's son, but as himself. Isaiah Moore. A kid who stood tall because he belonged, because he did. 3 months later, Westbrook Middle School had changed in ways both visible and invisible. Principal Douglas had decided to pursue other opportunities, replaced by Dr. Anita Washington, an experienced administrator with a background in inclusive education. The school had implemented new anti-bullying programs and cultural sensitivity training for all staff. Isaiah sat at a lunch table surrounded by friends, not just Tyler and Marcus, but a diverse group that had formed around their shared experience. They called themselves the Justice League, half joking, but also serious about looking out for each other and younger students. Did you hear Ms. Roberts is doing a cultural heritage project next month? Tyler asked, grabbing a French fry from Isaiah's tray. Yeah, I'm thinking of doing mine on my mom's family, Isaiah replied. They were from Haiti originally. That's awesome, said Jenny, whose mother was now the school board president after the previous one resigned. My mom says the new curriculum is bringing in stuff from all different cultures. After school, Sheriff Moore picked up Isaiah for their weekly patrol ride, a tradition they'd started to spend more time together. Isaiah climbed into the passenger seat, dropping his backpack on the floor. Good day, his father asked. Really good. I got an A on my history report. Sheriff Moore smiled. Your mom would be proud. As they drove through town, Isaiah noticed small changes. People waved to them now, not just at his dad's uniform, but at both of them. The incident had forced the town to have uncomfortable conversations about bias and belonging. Dad, do you think Ms. Peterson learned anything from what happened? Isaiah asked suddenly. Sheriff Moore considered the question. I hope so. I heard she's taking courses on cultural awareness before she can apply for teaching positions again. That's good, I guess. You know, Isaiah, what happened wasn't just about one teacher or one incident. It was about a whole system that let it happen. And systems don't change unless brave people speak up. Isaiah looked out the window, watching the town pass by. Like Mom used to. Exactly like your mom. She never let anything slide. Sheriff Moore's voice softened. When you spoke at that hearing, you reminded me so much of her. Isaiah felt warmth spread through his chest. It was the best compliment his father could have given him. They pulled up to the sheriff's office, where a group of deputies were waiting for their shift change. One of them, Deputy Ramirez, waved at Isaiah. "Hey, Isaiah. Still coming to speak at our community outreach program tomorrow." After the incident, Isaiah had reluctantly agreed to share his experience at a youth forum. To his surprise, he discovered he had a talent for connecting with other kids dealing with bullying or discrimination. "Wouldn't miss it," Isaiah replied, feeling a confidence that would have been unimaginable months ago. Later that evening, as Isaiah finished his homework, he found an old photo of his mother in his science textbook, her smiling face looking up at him as she bent over a chemistry experiment. He'd been using the photo as a bookmark. "I did it, Mom," he whispered. I stood tall. Outside his window, the small town of Westbrook continued changing, not perfectly or completely, but steadily. And Isaiah Moore, once the new kid trying to be invisible, had found his voice and his place in helping that change happen. It hadn't been an easy journey. But as his mother always said, the most important journeys rarely were. That's where this story comes to a close. Isaiah didn't ask to be brave. He just wanted to be seen, to be treated fairly. But the world doesn't always wait for us to be ready. It sometimes demands we speak up when it's hardest. What makes Isaiah's story unforgettable isn't the shame he endured, but the quiet strength he showed in the face of it. When he stood at that microphone and told the truth, he carried more than just his own pain. He carried a voice for every kid who's been made to feel small. And that voice echoed louder than any silence ever could. Do you think Ms. Peterson truly learned her lesson? Drop your thoughts below. We'd love to hear them. If you're still watching, you clearly love a good story. And let's be real, there aren't many channels like this one. So subscribe and then go check out the next tale waiting for you.